while because of finals and all that jazz, but now that school is over, I have finally been able to read something, and that is Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. And this is a book that I've been really highly anticipating and have been really wanting to read for a while, and I have to say that it did not disappoint. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I really loved the fantasy elements. Now, there weren't a ton of them, but you can tell that this book is just building up for the series, because I think it's going to be a 6-book series and only 5 are out so far. I just really liked the background that it brought to it, and I liked how it just explained all the fantasy elements and all the magic that went into this. So even though I was excited to start this book, I was a little bit worried because there is multiple perspectives and there's like lists of them. So you have lists for one kingdom, another kingdom, yet another kingdom, and then some watchers. And so I looked at that and I was just like, how am I going to keep all these people straight? So I was flipping back and forth just for a little bit, but then at some point it just clicks and it just all becomes clear, and it's just very easy to follow, and that's what I liked about this book. Even though there's a lot of elements that come into play here and there's multiple perspectives, it's just very clear, and I was never confused, and I felt that the sentences flowed so nicely, and I was just able to read this and relax at the same time, if that makes sense. Yeah, so getting to the plot, it's about these 3 kingdoms that used to be one called Mystica. Yeah. So here they are. So one is Limeros, and then Pelsia and Oranos. I might have butchered those, but yeah, so these 3 kingdoms, and years ago they used to all be one called Mystica, but then there was stuff that was dealing with the fantasy elements that came into play, and they were divided up by war. They've been living at peace ever since, but it's not really peace because they've all been living on edge. They all have a problem with one another, all the kingdoms, and so we're kind of like at the break of war at this point. Speaking of magic, magic is on the down low. No one really talks about it. If they do, it's all kind of like a folktale in a way that not a lot of people actually believe it. And for those who are actually witches or people who practice some sort of magical ability, they have to hide their powers or else they'll be burned at the stake pretty much, because no one really talks about it. And so that's what I really liked about this book, is that it's all coming to light now. We're starting to see it develop and it's coming back, and so I'm excited for what the next books bring. There were a couple of things that I would have rather been different, but they weren't deal breakers in any way. So without further ado, we're gonna start the spoilers right now. So like I said, I really liked the magic element. I liked how we got the backstory. One thing that I thought was really cool is that we see why the countries aren't doing so well. Well, certain countries. Oranos seems to be flourishing. I'm sure we'll find out the reason for that later on. But for Pelsia and Limeros, they're not doing so great, especially Pelsia. They pretty much have nothing but wine. And so part of that reason we learned is because the kindred has been stolen a long time ago. And I thought was so cool is that the fact that those who stole it were thought to be goddesses that people talked about. Cleo, and the other one starts with a V, I think. That's what the kind of rumors were that were going around, but as we find out that 2 women were actually just watchers and they became greedy and they stole the kindred that has 4 elements and they divided it in 2, and then they became greedy and they fought each other so one could have all 4, and they both killed each other in the process. I also really enjoyed that we learned that Cleo was a descendant of the hunter who was in love with the original sorceress, and that her father had the ring the entire time, and I thought that was just a nice touch before he died, that he actually did believe because of Cleo's mother. Now Cleo has the ring, and we'll see how she's able to use the 4 elements in a way without being corrupt, so I'm interested to see how that works. Speaking of Cleo, she is my favorite character. I really enjoy just her personality. She's very feisty, she is very determined, and she is kind of she's pretty spoiled. She's used to getting what she wants, but I enjoyed how her character knows that. She even says, like, I know I'm used to getting what I want. But I feel like what she wants in this book, it's very selfless. She wants to save her sister, and yeah, it was pretty reckless to go to Pelsia without her father's permission because it is dangerous, and what good can she do when you think about it? But she did it because she loves her sister, and you jump leaps and bounds for the people you love. So I thought it was really commendable of her, and it actually, she got what she needed even though it was too late, and I was just like, oh, Cleo, you had the seeds, you could have saved your sister. But I mean, I kind of thought her sister was going to die because it seemed kind of obvious, like I bet Cleo is going to become queen. Another thing I did like about Magnus's character, even though I do have a problem with Magnus, and I'll get to that just after this, but what I really liked about Magnus's character is that when we're just in his head, he is that total brooding boy who's misunderstood. He comes off as arrogant, but he really has a soft heart, and people see him as his father. But when you're in his head, you don't see him as though he's like his father. He seems to actually care and have different hopes and goals for his country. What was really interesting is that when we're in Cleo's mind and we see her interact with Magnus without having his perspective, I totally get why people think Magnus is like his father. He comes off like the king of blood in a way when, you know, when he kills Theon. And I thought this was a really interesting thing because, like, I totally understand Magnus at one hand, but then when you're in someone else's perspective, he seems like a total jerk, and that he's relentless and ruthless. So I'm excited to see what happens with his character later on. Now, a couple of things that I did have a problem in this book that I want to talk about. They're not deal breakers in any way, but one of the things was with Magnus's character that I didn't really like. It's interesting because a lot of people find him to be their favorite character, but I just didn't see that. Maybe it'll change later on as I get through the series. The fact that he was in love with Lucia just really bothered me, and I found it rather creepy whenever he was just like staring at her, looking at her lips and like wanting to kiss her. And I just found it so, it was just disturbing, and I didn't like it. Even though we know that she's not really his sister, they're not blood related, he still had those feelings when he thought they were. So yeah, it still seems so wrong. It took away from his character for me. However, I have a theory, and I could totally be wrong since I haven't read any of the other books in the series. I'm wondering that maybe because of her powers, he couldn't help himself, and if that were the case, I can totally look past that. But if it's not the case, and if he just started loving her on his own free will, I don't like it. Another thing that I didn't totally enjoy was the ending of Cleo's and Theon's relationship. I was definitely rooting for them for almost the entire book. I love their interactions together. We don't get to see a lot of them, but the ones that we do see, you can just tell that there's that like attraction there, and you just want them to be together. And I loved how he went after her and saved her. I thought that was totally romantic. And when we finally kissed, I was like, yes. But then right after they kiss, Cleo starts talking about marriage and then how they're gonna spend the rest of their lives together. And I'm just sitting here like, how did we get from here to here? It seemed like we skipped like 100 pages of character development, relationship development, and it just seemed totally off. It seemed so insta-lovey, and I didn't like it, and it just made me like take a step back and think to myself, and I wasn't like totally on board with them after that. But then shortly after the next scene, Magnus kills Theon, and I was probably surprised for like half a second because it all just came together like, okay, of course, that's why they sped everything along, because they're gonna kill him. I was really sad when Theon died, but at the same time, I think I would have been more upset if that scene previously with the whole marriage and everything didn't happen, because going into the scene where Theon dies, I was still a bit annoyed with their relationship. So I hate that he's dead. I love Theon, but I think it could have been more impactful if that scene previously just didn't happen, because it just seemed kind of odd, and it just didn't seem as realistic to me. So Jonas kind of annoyed me at first because it seems really ridiculous that he's mad at Cleo, because Cleo had nothing to do with his brother's death. It was Aaron, and I feel like he should be just focusing all his anger on Aaron instead of Cleo. I feel like she's the type of scapegoat because she's the one there at the time. But then it was pretty obvious that he was attracted to her, and I could tell, okay, he's going to be helping her in some way, shape, or form. And we get to that point at the end of the book. You can tell he's a total rebel. He knew that the king of Limeros was going to betray the chief and kill him, and obviously that happened. And so I'm glad that he came to his senses, even though I wish he would have come to his senses earlier on, but nevertheless, I think he's going to be a really neat asset in the next book, and I hope we get to see more of him because I do like Jonas. I'm definitely interested to see where Lucia's character development goes because obviously she's just trying to please her father at this point. But there's going to come a time where she's going to see that he is completely using her and has no other use for her than her powers, and I'm excited to see what she does because she killed his mistress without even thinking about it pretty much, and I'm wondering if his death will be at her hands. I think that would be pretty neat, but we'll see. So those are my thoughts and feelings about Fallen Kingdom. Sorry if they were a bit scattered, but overall I loved it. I thought it was a great first installment for a series. So thanks for watching, guys, and until next time.